Ready, set? Okay. Welcome to the Basalt Council regular meeting. Let's call the meeting to order at 6 o'clock, and I want to thank Sarah at Grassroots. She's right back there. You can't see her, but we can, for recording this for us. And these videos are played on Grassroots, of course, occasionally during the week, and you can watch them if you missed the live. Also, a reminder that the Mayor's Coffee is tomorrow and every Wednesday following a regular Tuesday meeting. I will not be there. However, in my stead will be Bernie Grauer and Jennifer Riffle. So, isn't that wonderful? Thank you. So feel free to check in with those guys. So I guess did we do the roll call? Could we do that, please?
Here.
Here.
Here. Thanks, Pam. Okay, the consent agenda has the minutes of the July 26th meeting and continued public hearing and resolution of the town council regarding a zoning issue. Does anybody want to have any of these pulled off for discussion, or is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion to approve.
Is there, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. The next item is council comments, reports, disclosures, and other reports. Any meaningful business that the council members may have conducted outside of here, or information they want to share with public? Katie.
Two things. One, following up from our last meeting, has there been any progress regarding the request for additional financial information from the Roaring Fork Conservancy?
Yes, Susan sent Pat McMahon that list of information that I had sent to you.
Yes.
And if Susan gets back.
I'm right here, and he wanted, actually this is perfect, because he wanted me to tell all of you that he would be providing that information to all the council. She requested for that email that I forwarded on to him.
Okay, so maybe in next council meeting by then we'll have that information. You didn't give a timeline.
You know, I'm not sure. I think he was thinking that he might meet with a smaller group first.
Okay.
Rather than the entire council.
Got it.
Could we just ask that you follow up
Yeah.
with all of us in response to that question? Thank you.
Thank you. And then I just have one more thing, and that's, I just want to share my perspective in response to the Takaw article that was published yesterday in the Aspen Times. My perspective being that I sat at the table with Bernie and Jackie, the finance committee, along with the Takaw members. And I just want to point out first that Bernie spent about 2 days researching Takaw's documents and transactions with the town. And first of all, I want to thank Bernie for that. And second, I want the town to understand that this is the level of commitment and work that this council is putting into understanding a lot of issues that are going on in the town and Takaw in particular. Through this process that Bernie spent about 2 days going through, he uncovered several items of concern that required immediate attention. Those items included, first, Takaw not having an accounting system that accurately tracked the RETA or the town funds to the pre-development budget. And second, that there were progress reports that hadn't been provided to the town containing a level of detail that was expected and required. An example would be that Takaw hired a director without coming to town council and requesting those funds. There was an Exhibit A in the pre-development agreement that had a line item that said managing director, and that line item was blank, zero, nothing. And that has become the largest expense that they have been asking for funding. I'd also like to state that I continue to have concerns related to the use of the RETA. It explicitly states in the pre-development documents that the funding for the RETA is to support, number one, building and maintaining an actual building, and second, to creating an endowment to support the arts facility once completed. Since I've joined the board in April, the RETA fund reimbursements that I have seen have included director's salary, a board retreat that was food and drink, office supplies, and rent. And I don't feel that that meets the pre-development agreement that I just described for funding. And so far within this calendar year, it seems that Takaw has expended or asked for reimbursements of approximately $70,000. During Bernie's investigation, he uncovered that TACA had submitted a $7,500 invoice for reimbursement. And thanks to the quick response of our CFO, she was able to pull that check and make sure that it hadn't been funded, because TACA neglected to tell our CFO and our council that this event actually didn't happen. So I appreciate the fact that that was caught. And to go back to a quote that that appeared in the paper yesterday, that's what I found shocking and disturbing. So in light of these concerns, the Financial Advisory Board recommended that funding to TACA be suspended. We also, in light of the fact that in our eyes the pre-development agreement had not been honored by TACA, the Financial Advisory Board recommended termination of this agreement. So that's my summary of what happened last Tuesday night with TACA. Thank you.
Thanks, Katie. Bernie?
Yeah, I'll report a meeting that, after that difficult meeting, in which the Times article very accurately portrayed me as irate, because it wasn't just this 1,7,500, and this was a series of emails I received from the city's CFO, Judy Tippett, that there was a pattern of non-compliance of expenses to be reimbursed from the RETA funds that were not supported by documentation, receipts, and so on. And there was a pattern of resistance to providing such information and cooperating with our CFO. So I wasn't individually mad at anybody. Those are all fine people on the TACA board, public-spirited citizens. I was very irritated that our CFO should be disrespected and that we should spend even more money, trying to help them administer their nonprofit when they should be doing it. I'm happy to report they reached out to us and asked Mike and me and Jackie, so if any of us could join the meeting at them at 3:30. I was the only one who could meet at 3:30, and we had a very cordial, very forthright meeting, and as a result of that, they agreed to have their new general manager completely redo their financing and accounting back to day one of their operation and submit it in proper form to the council for review, which I think is a step forward. We have them on the agenda for later, so I think I'll just wait until then to say anything more.
I would like to report that I met with Scott Thompson, our fire chief, and his message to counselors is to take the ICS program. And then as well, I met with a group called the Roaring Fork. Oh, I'm gonna bungle the name, so I'm just gonna state the people. And that it was regarding affordable housing. It included David Myler, Mary Kenyon, Bill Lamont, Tim Belinsky, myself, Mike Scanlon, and Susan Phillip. We met and discussed regional housing. And then as well, I attended a joint meeting in Eagle County with regarding affordable housing as well, regional housing, with Brent McFall, the county manager of Eagle County, Jill Klosterman, Scott Gilbert of Habitat for Humanity, Susan, Mike, and myself. And then as well, I have met multiple times with Jill Ryan independently, and then as well, Bach has updated and is working on the suggested preferred areas for affordable housing locations. And we have a new updated map with expanded preferences. There's quite a lot of parcels, and we're very excited to share it with all of these possible partners to expand the affordable housing. That's it. Yeah.
I thank Jen for being kind of helping me with this childcare and affordable housing potential funding that the Eagle County is looking to put on the ballot. And so the Eagle County Commissioners on Monday are looking, they're gonna be potentially looking at a ballot question at their next BOCC meeting to put on the ballot, you know, a tax for affordable housing and for early childcare. And I really praise Eagle County for taking a huge lead on this, because as the town, we've been looking at a Healthy Communities Fund potential, but if you do it as a county, you capture so many more people, and you capture potentially so much more funding that you can make a lot of things happen. And so, you know, I'm gonna be throwing my personal huge support on behind it, but but I've been contacting Kathy Chandler Henry, Jill Ryan, and Gina McQueenie to encourage them to put this on the ballot. And because it's such a huge community need. It's identified as a huge community need over here between affordable housing and early childcare. We've been working really hard to make things happen. And so I hope we can get a lot of community support to, you know, create real funding for real big issues, and we can actually make some solutions, so.
Thanks, Gary. Gary, also, if they're putting together a resolution that they want communities to sign on to, maybe we could discuss that when it's time.
They would love that. I was
Okay.
approached and that was what I was going
Okay.
to follow up with, is if the council as a whole could draft an endorsement of putting those items on the ballot, they would greatly appreciate that. And as well, there is a meeting on Tuesday, August 16th at Eagle County. The time has not been disclosed yet, for the further discussion of these items, and it is open to public comment. And they highly invite anyone from the Roaring Fork Valley side to email, write them, call them, or show up in person, as they really view the Roaring Fork Valley side as leaders, and we can work together. Great.
Mark?
Yep.
Nothing? Okay. Does our town manager have a report?
Yes, I'm gonna start with the chief and annual night out.
Good evening. How are you, chief?
Well, thank you.
Good.
Just a quick update on National Night Out that happened last Tuesday. Oh, look, I get to use that.
I knew you were coming.
There it is. So we had, Basalt Lions Club was doing the cooking for us. They estimated that we had about 400 people attend the event. It was a wonderful event. We had bouncy houses for the kids, the fountains that at Triangle Park were running, a lot of kids playing in that. Fire department was there, Eagle County Sheriff's Office was there. I put a little flyer on your desks, and it just shows the sponsors and people that helped us out with it. We raffled off several items from the donors that donated to us for a raffle for the people. Tim Belinsky's company donated the bounce house. Alpine Bank had their popcorn wagon. So it was just a really good community night, wonderful event. So just wanted to give you a quick update on it. Next year's is August 1st, 2017. Put it in your phones. We'll have a dunk tank. And you can get in the dunk tank.
Thanks.
Any questions on it?
No. Do you have any other, like, relevant news about things that may be more policey, that aren't maybe as much fun as this, that we should hear about, or?
Fun. Not off the top of my head. Nothing that I can
Like
think of.
trends that are getting better or worse, or anything like that?
You know, we're full swing in the summer. There's a lot of traffic. We're doing a lot of traffic enforcement. We have seen an increase in driving under the influence, but that's also because we have a couple grants that we're out doing increased patrols. And that's through Pitkin County and Eagle County. So we're having officers out doing increased patrol on overtime that's reimbursed. So we are seeing more impaired driving, but that's also due to a higher enforcement
Right.
and having the people to be out there doing it.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Chief.
Yes, Jen?
Mayor, I would like to motion that agenda item 8, oh, sorry, we're still in the mayor's, in the
It's
manager's.
all right.
Okay, I motion, agenda item 8B be tabled from agenda and rescheduled to a later date.
Could we actually have a motion to continue it to the August 23rd meeting? Because it's an advertised public hearing, and that way we don't lose our public hearing notice.
Can you change it to continue?
I had to write that down,
Okay.
otherwise I wouldn't verbalize it right. Mayor, I motion to table agenda item continue to August 23rd council meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you, Jen. Okay, let's see. Manager's report, part 2.
Part 2, trees removed, week and a half, 2 weeks ago. The cable was put underneath the roundabout, if you were up there Saturday, Sunday for CenturyLink. So most of the utilities are getting relocated so that we can start construction. Still haven't gotten the construction calendar, still working on getting that. We have one more IGA that we have to sign with CDOT, and that comes on the 23rd, and then that's the last sort of like paperwork that we have. And we were able, and I think we announced this at the last meeting, to combine all of our CDOT dollars into one pot so that when we're seeking reimbursement, we don't have to go through the 6 different unique funding reports that are required, so they've allowed us to consolidate. And I think that's a function of our size and understanding that, you know, small staff really helps us when we can do that.
Is that it?
That's it.
Okay, that was pretty small. If it's possible to put that in writing and include it in the agenda, I think, you know, it helps so the public can see it, and if there's anything that we might want to research separately, we have time to do that.
Sure.
The next item is citizen comments for items that are not on the agenda and items that are added to the agenda after the deadline, which I don't think we have any of. But if there are any citizens that have comments for items that are not on this agenda, we invite you to come forward. And because Auden's not here, Auden has really stressed the importance to us of making people feel comfortable to come up here, because quite honestly, it's a lot easier to sit on this side of the table than that side. So if you have anything, we have a citizen chair now where you can sit beside us instead of at us, but it doesn't look like we have anything. So, okay, thanks. Okay, the next item is second reading of ordinances. This is public hearing and second reading of ordinance 18, approving rezoning to R3TN and special review of an accessory dwelling unit at 309 East Sopris Drive, Lot 1B of the Osmond subdivision. Susan and Kai Peterson, welcome.
Thank you.
Yes.
So this is a public hearing, and it's a second reading, and this is an application that James Lint was handling, and he's on vacation, so I'm handling the item tonight. But this is for an ADU on the lot for Kai Peterson and his wife Bethany Card, who's in the audience. This application was reviewed actually quite thoroughly at the P&Z with neighbors in attendance. The main issues really had to do with the construction management and parking. So the P&Z added a number of conditions addressing the construction management plan and the time of construction, and and also required an additional parking space that wasn't required by the code. I think the application was well received by the town council at the last meeting, so we're ready to approve it at this meeting. It is a public hearing, and I would offer that maybe Kai answer any questions that you have, or provide any other summary that he would like to do.
Not really. I could go through kind of my 5-minute quick rundown for people who weren't here if you're interested, or just take questions.
This is a second reading, so I think we may have gotten the drift, but if anybody has questions about it, they're welcome to ask you. Anybody? So I think we're pretty good to go. Okay, having heard the staff and applicant, this is a public hearing, opening the public hearing at 6:20. Is there anyone in the public who has comments regarding this application? Okay, hearing none, I will close the public hearing.
Mayor, I move that the town council approve ordinance number 18, series of 2016 on second reading.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Way to go.
Thank you.
Congrats. Good luck, have fun.
Yes. The next item is also a public hearing, an ordinance of the town authorizing the conveyance of real property being a portion of the town's property located at 30 Shining Mountain Way, Snowmass. Tom, is that your?
I'll take this one. You have an agenda item summary, same as, it's the same as you saw at your previous meeting at first reading. By way of quick summary, the town acquired property in Old Snowmass, the address of which is 30 Shining Mountain Way, from Rocky Mountain Institute as a mitigation for affordable housing requirements. A survey showed that the fence constructed over 20 years ago on the property was not built on the lot line, and the effect of that was that adjacent property owners were using very small portions of the town's property. In order to clear up that cloud on title, we first got approval for a lot line adjustment from Pitkin County, and in order to fulfill the lot line adjustment approval, it's necessary to then convey to the property owners the small slivers that are outside of the fence line and on that property. The conveyance of those small slivers of land doesn't affect the town's use of the property for any purpose. It's in an open field that is not used for anything and doesn't affect the buildings that we own on the property and that are used for affordable housing. So I'm recommending it for approval on second reading, and this is a public hearing.
As you said, this is a public hearing. We'll open the hearing at almost 6:25. Is there anybody in the public that has comments regarding this application? Hearing none, I will close the public hearing and go to council questions and comments or motions.
I move town council approve ordinance 19, series of 2016 on second reading.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thanks, guys. Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Tom.
Okay, so, the next item, 7A, is a resolution of the Town Council of Basalt amending Council Policy 110 related to the Town Council Finance Policy. And in reviewing this a little bit, it looks like the minutes are not there, and some of the things that we talked about are either incorrect or not there. Bernie, do you have a thought about this one?
Well, I would say it should come back, we should pull it, and it should come back after we
Is that a
review
motion?
it. I'll make a motion that we continue the revision to Town Council Policy 110 and reschedule for what date?
August 23rd.
August 23rd, and that the Finance Committee shall take additional time to review it and make suggested changes.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. The next one, I think, is the Resolution 33, which is a resolution of the Town Council calling a special election on November 8th for authorization to incur debt, issue general obligation bonds, and levy property taxes to pay such bonds, setting the ballot title and content for the ballot issue, and providing other matters relating thereto. And Mike and I talked about this a little bit, as also Jen and I talked about this. This is a resolution, and it's not really a work session, but we would like to get a lot of this work out of the way, and we would like to know that there will be heavy public hearing time for this and when it will be.
At the last meeting, you said that it would be this Thursday and Saturday. And is there a time and a place?
So what we were gonna do was use our council chambers on Thursdays and Saturdays, once this was approved. So are we gonna approve something we're gonna share, or do we use both these?
I think maybe we should get a little ways into this and
Okay.
pick which one we are going to look at. But I think it would be, in my mind, makes some sense for the public to weigh in before we approve it finally.
Okay. So,
Just a second, Tom has something.
We have time. For approval of the ballot question or not.
September 9th
is the very last, and that's drop dead date. The county clerks
Okay.
prefer that we have stuff in earlier than that, but
Well,
that's our drop dead.
Right, that's the only qualification I'm throwing out there, is that there's a deadline to
Right.
get it on the ballot.
and I think that we clearly have to meet that deadline, but also we have to take public comment, and I feel like there would be a lot more people here if they thought there was gonna be public comment taken tonight, and that's just not flying without public comment. So why don't we see how we do on this language and everything, and circle back at the end of the meeting? But I am kind of with Jen in thinking that if we're gonna get public comment on this, that's gonna be relative to anything, we gotta do it, like, soon. So let's, having said that, why don't we go ahead with the presentations and see what we come up with?
So, Paul Weiser's with KEV, the bond counsel that we're using on this issue. He previously was with Ellers, so some of you probably remember seeing Paul.
Welcome, Paul. You have the same, almost exact uniform on, though. It's hard to tell, it's different.
Yeah, most people don't quit their public finance job to go do another public finance job, so I'm sure a lot of therapy will help me figure out my problems. I was with Ellers, I'm now with KAV as your public finance bond attorney, and thanks for having me back.
So what I was gonna have Paul do is sort of step through the resolution and question that was in your packet. And then we had a question about could you include land and what would that look like? And so he produced two questions, one with land in and one with land out. And then he can go through sort of the nuances of each of the questions, highlighting both when you come up with lists that are in the question, what that means, the tax exempt versus taxable. Once you arrive at a question, sort of what happens in terms of what town staff can do in terms of providing information. Then after he finishes, we took the Ellers numbers and then ran them backwards to make sure that the monies that were available could still be available and how they would be used, depending on which questions considered. And then we'll talk a little bit about how you could use COPs as a bridge financing piece and then go to a tax exempt bond piece if it passed, and then get rid of your COPs if you wanted to. So.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, so the plan, I think, is for me to talk about the resolution and then kind of have a second part of talking about some more big picture issues. If at any point you guys have questions, please jump in and we can discuss, but hopefully I'll hit everything that we need to hit tonight. So just as a reminder, I'm here tonight because of the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. Under the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, the town is required to hold an election anytime the town enters into a multi-year fiscal obligation. A multi-fiscal year obligation under Tabor is considered, or general obligation bond falls under that definition. And so when we're talking about the projects you're considering issuing bonds to do a considerable amount of it. Now, we will probably be talking about certificates of participation or a bank loan secured by a lease purchase agreement. Those two things, under the Colorado Supreme Court's view, do not constitute a fiscal year obligation. And so they do not require voter approval. So the reason we're here tonight is to pass a resolution setting an election question for the town to incur debt and raise taxes to fund bonds. And we can thank Doug Bruce and Tabor for that. So, we do have 3 different questions that are up there, and one question contemplates that the town will do a series of improvement projects to the Basalt River Park, as well as purchase the CDC parcel. And we can go through what those numbers look like, but the amounts within that question are higher than the amounts in the second question, which contemplates simply asking for authority from the voters to incur debt and raise taxes for the purpose of simply doing the improvement projects. Now we have kind of a third option up there that Mike and I talked about today, that we could ask the question to do only the projects and not purchase the land, but make that bond question contingent on the town purchasing the land. So you wouldn't do any of the improvements unless you knew that the town had acquired the CDC parcel. And we've thrown out there, that option, just in case people think, well, what's the point of us going ahead unless we do own that parcel? And it's just something for you guys to think about as an option that is out there.
It's the Appendix A.
Yellow highlighted. It's got a little yellow highlighted.
And we don't
We don't have
option
the-
C.
No.
So you don't have those in the packet, but you have a version in front of you. And I think unless you guys have any questions about kind of that general overview about what we're doing or what we're trying to accomplish here, I think it would be useful to go not line by line, but go through the chunks of this question so you guys understand what it is that you're putting in front of the voters. Because Tabor requires that very certain language be used in very certain ways in order to ask these questions. And I will admit that, before I started doing this job, I never read those questions very carefully. I just kind of generally understood what they were asking and never really got into what line by line it actually meant. So I think it's at least important for council to understand what they're asking of the voters before the voters actually get their ballots. Yeah. Sure.
If we could all staff and council, please ask for the floor, because we're gonna have a presentation here, and maybe he's gonna wanna take questions, but it just makes it generally known who gets to talk.
Can I request in your presentation that you cover the difference between COP versus the GO bonds, the pluses and minuses of each?
Sure, we can do that right now. And I hate to keep going back to this, but it's kind of the linchpin of everything we do. Under Tabor, there's a constitutional requirement that voters approve any tax increase or incurrence of debt by a government such as the town. And so if you just read the basics of Tabor, you would think, okay, that means any sort of debt obligation the town has should be subject to voter approval. Tabor was passed in 1992. In 1993, the Supreme Court of the state of Colorado ruled that certain financing mechanisms, namely certificates of participation or lease purchase agreements, are not considered multi-year fiscal obligations under Tabor. And because of that, they are not subject to voter approval. Now, what they mean, and so a COP or a lease purchase agreement basically says that the town is going to make annual payments in order to repay debt. Those payments are not guaranteed payments by the town. They are subject to annual appropriation. So every year, the town has to come back and say, yep, we are going to vote to pay that $1 million, annual payment that we have to make to Centennial Bank to pay for our town hall. Because it is subject to you guys making that vote, the Colorado Supreme Court says it's not a multi-year fiscal obligation under Tabor. So lots of towns and the state and pretty much any other entity within Colorado uses those mechanisms in order to pay for projects, and they do that without voter approval. So I guess in terms of pros and cons, the general obligation bonds have the advantage of being entirely transparent, right? They have full voter approval, and although not 100% backing of all the voters, a majority of the voters have said, yes, we want to do this project, and we want the town to incur this debt. In addition, rating agencies and investors in general see that general obligation bonds have the full security of a town, and because they are not subject to annual appropriation and the town can go ahead and pull revenue from wherever they want, those bonds are rated higher than certificates of participation or lease purchase agreements. Because they're rated higher, the town gets a lower interest rate on the debt that they issue. So you end up essentially getting a better deal. Now, on the flip side of that, COPs and would typically be a bank loan that would be secured by a lease purchase agreement. Basically, the town saying, we're going to lease town hall and use that as security for you to give us a chunk of money that we will pay back. That is easier or quicker to do because usually, at least in the terms of a bank loan, you don't need a rating. You don't need any disclosure documents. So basically, I just put together a smaller version of a general obligation bond, and it's quicker. And so you could, in some cases, I've done deals where governments are able to go from start to finish within about 6 weeks, and they're able to get cash in order to do their project. So it's a faster way of doing things. With respect to COPs, you still have to go through the public debt process, but you end up with a higher interest rate because investors are taking the risk that you as a town are going to make that annual appropriation. Now that risk is pretty low because as you're going to put up collateral like town hall, and if you fail to appropriate, JP Morgan is going to come in and kick Mike and everybody else out, and they're going to take over this building, which you guys don't want to do. So you're likely going to appropriate money every year, but there's still that risk that you wouldn't, and that you would walk away from your town hall and your project. And so your interest rates are going to be higher. Those are kind of the major trade-offs between the two. I think in terms of COPs and general obligation bonds, that's about it. Anything else at the moment? Yeah.
What's the difference in spread right now between a GO that we might issue versus a COP that we might issue?
So we just finished a deal with another mountain town, and they were looking at doing a project not all that dissimilar from yours, and they have to imagine a very similar rating. The deal was a little bit smaller, well, depending on what you do, a little bit smaller, and it was about a point between.
How much?
A point, so it was about.
A full percentage
Yeah,
point.
a full percentage.
So if we would issue, say, at 1.5 on our GO, the COP would be 2.5.
Yeah, but I think we should also keep in mind that that would be for a COP, which is a public debt issuance. If you were to go and do a bank loan, which is essentially the same collateral process, banks are at a really low rate right now, like 1.9%. So they're pretty close to where a GO.
So you
That would
feel
be-
that would be easy for us to acquire, a bank loan instead?
I have to say this, so I apologize. I'm not your municipal advisor. But yeah, I think it wouldn't be that difficult for you guys to go out and have your municipal advisor put out a RFP for bank proposals and for you guys to get a good amount of responses.
Because Mike and I had talked about this spread difference, and as I understand it, we could retire those COPs when we reissue our GO bonds and absorb them into them?
Yeah.
Is that something as common that?
Yeah, I mean, it's not the most common thing in the world, but depending on the call features within, call features, I mean, within the bond documents, the ability to basically refinance or extinguish that debt. Some bond documents in debt issuance say you can't do that for a certain period of years, usually 10 years. But sometimes you can structure it in such a way that they are callable or extinguished almost immediately.
But we would still have a higher rate. We would have to issue taxable bonds, wouldn't we, on the land that we want to be developable eventually?
So that's a good question, and something that we would really have to understand in terms of what it is that you're going to be doing on that land. The purchase of the CDC property in and of itself is not a taxable event, but it then depends on what you are doing with that property that would then make those bonds tax exempt or taxable. And so for those of you that maybe are not keeping up with Bernie's conversation with other people, right now the town has the ability to issue tax exempt bonds, right? And so you issue at a lower rate than a corporate entity would be issuing at. However, without getting too deep into IRS rules and regulations, if the town issues bonds and the proceeds of those bonds are used to benefit a private use, let's say Mike was showing me some of the sketches today, and there's this aspen leaf that might have a brewery or something going there. That brewery would benefit a private group. And so at least that portion of the bonds that was used to construct that portion of the park would be considered taxable. And so that's not something that really affects the way the election resolution or question is designed. That's more a question of perhaps how the bond resolution looks, and then most certainly how the bond documents look.
But that would have a somewhat higher interest rate.
Yeah,
Harry,
so-
the taxable versus the
In
non-taxable.
that same deal that I was talking about, there was also a discussion about tax exempt and taxable. The tax exempt rate on that particular deal, at least from the bank that entity was working with, the tax exempt was 3% and the taxable was 4.5. I think had they gone down that route, we probably could have brought the taxable rate down a little bit, but that's about the spread you're talking about.
Okay, thank you.
And so is that included in the repayment costs?
Sure. So that is something that we have to think about and I'll get to this in a second, but the bond resolution and the election question basically set up parameters for the bond issuance. And so it basically creates this box within which you can play. And so if we think that there's going to be a significant amount of taxable money in this deal, then it's going to be harder to stay within the parameters, because as I understand what Ellers did was base a lot of their projections based on a tax-exempt financing. And so if you were to tell me 75% of this is going to be taxable, then we might go back to Ellers and have them think about that a little bit and bump those numbers up.
So what ratio did Ellers do create this at? Is it 50-50, 60-40?
They used 4%, so they used a really high interest rate.
Right.
So
Right.
that's how they accounted for it.
Okay.
And 1.5 being the typical GO borrowing rate for a town of our rating. So there's 2 rating agencies. Why don't you say a little bit about that, because that impacts.
Sure. So there are essentially right now 2 rating agencies, Moody's and S&P. They will charge the town an arm and a leg, whether you like it or not, to give you a rating. And so for that $30,000, they will basically look at your financials and say, here's the financial health of the town. Here's what the economics of the area look like. You guys are going to get dinged because you're somewhat seasonal, even if you're not. That's what they think. And so they'll take in all these different factors and they'll give you a rating. And that rating then basically ties into your interest rate. And they go hand in hand, basically.
And we're currently AA?
I believe that's correct.
Okay. And then my original question was on the ratio that Ellers utilized. I'm thinking of the 2.3 acres, and so was it considered that 40% of the 2.3 acres was included in the math of how each would be funded? Or
So as relates to the land, when they did the A question, there was no land in that, so they really didn't have to factor it.
Right.
The only piece was the $300,000 for the greening of the commercial parcel, so it's a negligible amount. It's when you move over into incorporating the land that you have to take in that taxable piece, and that would represent roughly, let's say, 46% of the total land area.
okay, so that's the ratio that was
And
listed.
just so you know, and without getting too deep into it, the $300,000 didn't really affect what Ellers was doing, because under IRS regulations, there's like this 10% exception. So they give you a little wiggle room.
Okay.
So kind of following up with what Jennifer's saying, so Right now, it's approximately 60/40, with 40% being taxable, or
Yep.
43. So I'm just wondering,
Yeah, yeah. So that only applies to the second question.
of
That
course,
includes
because
the-
there's no land in the first one.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. So what kind of difference does that make if it's 50/50 versus 60/40 as far as the bottom line? Because it's a higher rate if it's.
Yeah, so your overall costs will go up. So when, I think in your packet actually, Ellers provided a schedule. And so you'll have your par amount, which, depends on which project you choose, right? And then you'll have your interest rate. And so your interest rates, you'll essentially have two interest rates, and it'll depend on how much of the project, let's just say it's 50/50. And so you'll pay an interest rate on your tax exempt, and then you'll pay an interest on your taxable portion. And so the interest rate on your taxable portion will probably end up costing you another, over 10 years, I'm just gonna guess, but $200,000,
And this is on a 60/40 split?
50/50.
50/50, okay, so, all right, so it's noticeable but not
It's not, I mean.
deal killers.
I would be, if I were in your financial advisor's shoes, I would tell you that you were making a big mistake if you're making your decision on whether or not to do this project based on the taxable nature of it, just given that interest rates are so remarkably low right now, that if you did this project, if you're considering this project in, let's say, 3 years from now, you might be looking back and saying, gosh, I mean, those taxable rates were really, really low, because they're at where most tax exempt rates typically are.
Katie, anything? Good? Okay, yeah, let's keep going.
All right. So I believe you do have a resolution and an election question in front of you, Appendix A. And so I just quickly want to go through and kind of help you guys understand what it is that you're asking the voters. So I believe the version that you have asked for the non-land, so the principal amount that you're asking the voters for is $6,950,000, correct? That's what you have in front of you?
Okay,
All right.
I think we have both, don't we now?
You do it now, but let's look at the one without land, because I'm gonna have to throw something in there real quick. All right, so if you just look at the very first part of that question that reads, shall town of Basalt debt be increased up to $6,950,000 with a maximum repayment cost of $9,030,000, and shall taxes be increased up to $1,500,000 annually? This little portion is required by Tabor, the way Tabor is written. We, as the drafter, we have to start with the shall debt be increased. So it's required, and basically what the voters are saying is that, or the $6,950,000 represents the maximum amount of debt the town can incur to do this project. So you cannot spend any more than $6,950,000 doing the riverfront improvement project. The $9,030,000 number represents the maximum amount the town may spend repaying the project. So, do you guys, do you not have it?
These are not correct. This first one I got does not match that.
Okay, that's fine.
Missing
The tax part.
and shall town taxes be
Be
increased by up
increased.
to 1.5 million.
All right.
So we'll just have.
So yeah, can you just, I apologize.
That's all right.
Can I ask a
Sure.
question? Where does the $6,950,000 come from when it states that the total requested in bond issue is $600,661, $253?
So whenever we're doing, so let me back up 2 seconds. Let's remember that the election question basically creates the sandbox in which you can play in. And so we always give a little bit of cushion because you're in a mountain community, construction costs are a little bit higher. They always go up a little bit faster than they will in the metro area. And you're not gonna start this project until 2017. And so we just wanna make sure that, yeah, these are the projects you wanna do, but that's the quote that you got today. And so we wanna give you a little bit of room.
Underwriters, so like on that Eller page?
Sure.
Use of funds?
But yeah. And that's also why the second number that we're going to talk about, it's a little bit higher too, to account for what Mike's talking about, to pay me, right, and Ellers and other people. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see that, but the first part basically has 3 numbers in it. The first number is $6,950,000. That is what we call your principal amount. So that's the amount that the town is going to get in the bank, and it's the money that you can use to go ahead and do the project. The second number, the $9,030,000, that is the total amount that you, the town, can use to repay that debt. So that includes the interest that you're going to pay on the original principal amount, as well as the costs for rating agencies, bond attorneys, municipal advisors, whatever else we try and gouge you with. And then the final number, and this is really important, and it reads, and shall town taxes be increased up to $1,500,000 annually. So every year, the town can raise up to $1.5 million to pay for these projects and to repay the debt. Any questions so far?
Well,
Yes.
that's always, I mean, we had the same issue on the last question where
Yeah.
you have to say this, but
Right.
it really means this. Can you just say that in English? It says this,
Yeah.
but it really means this?
Well, yeah, so, yeah, let me make a note to bring on something up here. So what that really means is that you're going to ask the town to authorize you to basically spend almost $7 million to do the project. And you promise the town that in order to do that, you're not going to raise taxes on them by more than $1.5 million a year. But they are giving you the authority to do that.
I thought we were gonna do this without raising taxes.
We are.
Exactly.
Right. So that brings me to the point that I was just writing down. So, as the mayor just noted, this looks a lot like the bond question that was passed in 2013. It's a lot like the question that was passed in 2013. And so the 2013 question was before this board and approved by the voters. And the language within there said that you were issuing $5 million worth of debt in order to redevelop the Pan and Fork project, right? That question gave you the authorization to get $5 million, repay the debt, and raise taxes on the town of Basalt in order to do that project, but only to do those things. So right now, the town is paying 3.37 mils right now to finance that project. But once the town is done,
That's all of our outstanding.
or everything, so, yeah. But so once the town is done paying the debt on that project, your authorization to levy that tax and incur the debt goes away. So this question basically is going to slide into the place of the 2013 question. And the voters still have to approve it because you're doing a completely different project at a different amount for a different purpose. And so under Tabor, you have to ask this question again. From the taxpayer's perspective, this looks like a tax extension because theoretically, you're not going to be raising their taxes. Their taxes are going to remain the same under the finance plan that you have set up to do this project. So the mill levy is going to remain the same, and people are they're not going to see a difference. So from a taxpayer perspective, when they get their bill every year, it's just going to look like, we're still doing what we were doing before. Yeah.
Why can't you say taxes will be continued, or?
So the reason we can't do that is because the way your bond question was written in 2013 was written in such a way that it was for the purpose of redeveloping Pan and Fork. And so now you're doing this for an entirely different reason. And in a sane world, you are right that you would just say, let's keep doing what we're doing. But unfortunately, under Tabor, you have to do it this way.
Jen?
I already have a marketing ploy for this, and the line is extend the sunset at the park.
Well, and just one second, Tom. The one thing, because that still doesn't ring of it's not a tax increase.
Sure.
So why does it say, the town shall taxes be, I don't have my glasses, be increased up to 1.5 annually, increased up to 1.5 annually. So, honest to God, I didn't get this in 2013 and I still don't get it.
So the easy answer for you, Mayor, is you have to call up Douglas Bruce, and he can answer it for you. Because it is now in the Colorado Constitution that I and every other bond attorney have to write our question that way.
You have to write it, but what is the meaning of you can raise taxes up to 1.5, but you're not really going to?
Because, so you're gonna be so let's think about what happens, what year does the Pan and Fork debt expire?
2021?
Okay. In 2021, let's just make up a date, July 1st, 2021, your taxes are going to go away that you are currently using to pay that debt. If you do nothing else, your mill levy and the town's authority to levy the mill levy at its current rate is going to drop, and it's going to go away. And so in the eyes of Tabor, you have to ask for permission to bring it back up to that level that's currently at.
Okay, we'll have to have like a little written, like cheat card for me. Yeah, Tom?
I was gonna make 2 points. One, that's the point that Paul just made, which is you have to assume that the expiration of the existing tax would actually occur. And that's why you're asking this question, because it's your rate, everybody's taxes would otherwise go down, okay? The second point is you're going to get to put the information out there in connection with the question. You're allowed to publish information that explains the ballot question and that identifies pros and cons, and that would be part of the explanation.
Yeah,
You
Mark?
would say it's just a continuation of the 2013 bond.
Right.
Yeah, well, we'll work with Paul on that, but that's kind of what it would say, right?
That is, yeah, we'll have to be careful about how we word it.
Yeah,
but
can't be misleading, but
But you guys are not alone in this situation. I mean, there are, school districts are set up in such a way that they have to go and ask these questions basically every 4 years, if not more frequently. And the way they structure their debt is such that they basically have this built into the system where their debt is gonna drop away and then they just bring it right back up to the same level. And so it's not unique to see this happen. It's also in school district situations, their selling point is that this is just an extension of the current tax that you currently pay. Even though it's not technically an extension, but it's just your world isn't changing at all, right?
Okay. I'm not going anywhere, Paul. I just need a back relief here.
You wouldn't be the first person to get bored of me and walk away.
Okay, so, just so we can, if the questions are kind of answered on this one, we probably have a lot more stuff to get through and conversations to have about the specifics here, so go ahead.
Okay, great. Do you want me to keep going through line by line? Okay, great. So it is important for you guys to understand that last part, that you are technically raising taxes, and that, the voters are going to be coming and asking, are you raising my taxes? And technically the answer is yes, although life's not gonna change for them. If you go to then we are adding this in, so this would be the part 3 up there, and this is just for your consideration. If we were to ask the question to do this project without the land, we could also add in language that says we would increase taxes and incur debt, both on the condition that the town acquires that certain, essentially, that it acquires the CDC property before it can do either of those things. And so that's just something for you guys to consider as to whether or not you would want that language in there.
Okay, can I just stop us for a second?
Sure.
It seems like we should, it seems like now, be talking about, do we want to ask a question that includes the land or does not include the land, and kind of get that cleared up so we're not gonna have these go in parallel while we continue this discussion?
Yeah,
Because
or
I
we can
have
just-
pretty
we-
strong feelings about this myself.
Right, or we can just skip that part and I can run through the rest of it, so you guys just understand
Okay.
generally what we're
Tom.
talking about.
there are two different ways to, and you can address this, Paul, but there are two different ways to include the land in the deal. One would be to just get an authorization to buy it, period, and pay for it out of the bond proceeds. The other is that the acquisition is a precondition to the issuance of the bonds for the other purposes. Isn't that right, Paul?
That's correct.
So there are two different ways, you have to understand, there's two different ways of addressing the land in the question if you want to do it that way.
Yeah. And to your, Mayor, to your point, let me get through the rest of the question, and then let's circle back and we'll have that broader discussion about land or no land. So if you drop down to kind of the next point, it would be, you're doing all this, you're incurring taxes and debt for the purpose of financing a portion of the cost of the Basalt River Park Improvement Project. And I don't think now is the time to necessarily debate these bullet points, but basically what you're saying is, we're incurring debt and raising taxes in order to do the following projects. Now, before, we can discuss whether or not these are gonna be the projects in a little bit, but I just want everyone to realize that when you put these bullet points in the ballot question, the Colorado Supreme Court says you have to do them. So there was an instance where Denver put out a ballot question. They said, we're gonna do these 5 projects. They did the first 4, and then they built something else with the extra money, and they got sued, and they had to go and find money to build that 5th project that they put in as a, here's what we're going to do. So it's possible to word this question very broadly and say, we're going to make improvements to the Basalt River Park, the end. And that gives you guys a lot of flexibility. But on the flip side, having the bullet points in there is something that a lot of towns prefer because it gives voters certainty as to here is what is going to get done. So that's that little section of the election question. Trying to move quickly, this is the really boring part of the question if we hadn't already hit that. That does say you're going to pay for these, quote, by the issuance and payment of general obligation bonds, revenue bonds, or other obligations, which bonds or obligations shall bear interest at a maximum net effective interest rate not to exceed 4.1% per annum, and mature, be subject to redemption, and be issued, dated, and sold at such times and such prices, at or above below par, and in such manner and containing such terms not inconsistent we are herewith, as the council may determine. Very sexy. Basically, what this says is that you guys have the authority and the ability to basically say what your bonds are going to look like, what the structure is going to look like, and the voters are giving you that power. A voter can't come in here and say, gosh, you didn't use JP Morgan to do your deal. Gosh, that, that annual payment doesn't seem right. You should move that to 2023. You guys have that power now. The one exception being that this election question will put in a maximum net effective interest rate, basically saying that you guys cannot exceed an interest rate. In this particular example, it's 4.1%. And the town is saying that if you guys are thinking about doing a bond deal, it better be a good one, or at least not one in which we pay excessively high interest rates. So that's the one constraint that you're really putting yourself on in terms of how the bonds are structured going forward.
Okay.
The next part of this provides that such debt is payable from all legally available monies, including revenue derived from the town's park, open space, and trails 1% sales tax, amounts in deposit in the town's general fund, or other available sources. So essentially this says that the town is going to pay for this money out of any means possible, including your post-tax. And just making that very clear to voters that you guys are on the hook in a variety of different ways. Part of this is in here for tabor purposes. Part of it is also in here for investment purposes. If you're an investment banker, you want to make sure that the town is going to be you want to get the town on the hook for as much as you possibly can, right? They want to make sure that you're not just going to pay out of one revenue source, that you're going to be able to pay your debt.
Sure.
Ernie?
Well, we're putting in a cushion at 4.1 that we don't expect to exceed it. What happens, we get a better rate than that?
You get a pat on the back?
What?
You get a pat on the back?
Pat on the back?
Yeah, I mean, you don't, if you exceed it or you,
No, if you get a rate that's, let's say, 3.1%.
Sure.
Does that lower the carrying cost and lower?
yeah, so remember, this is, the parameters of where you're going to be. Where you're actually going to end up is closer to 3%. This is just making sure that you don't get too far afield. And you really do want to give yourself some cushion because you don't want to end up in a situation where, something horrible in the world happens and interest rates go up and up and up, and
Yeah,
then
but-
you have a bond question that doesn't do you any good, because you have to wait.
Yeah, then your interest cost would not be the 2,100,000.
Right, so that sheet right there that you're holding, those numbers would change, and they're going to change.
So that would it might result in a somewhat lower mill levy.
Yes, so you don't have to levy the mill levy that you currently have. You can look at the bond deal that you ultimately end up with. You can look at what your assessed values are, and you can make that decision on a year-by-year basis.
And we don't,
Yeah.
and we do not need to go back to the voter to change the mill?
So the only reason that you would have to go back to the voters is if you got in a position, I can't imagine why this would happen, but something really bad would have to happen, that you would have to be paying more than the $1,500,000 annually. That's really where your restriction comes in. There are Tabor questions out there that say you can only raise X amount of mills, but the way we've written this is as a dollar amount, because I can't tell you what your assessed value is going to be in 3 years, and I don't want to guess. So in this way, voters know that there is a cap, but it does give you, the town, the flexibility to work within that.
Okay. And then, I mean, there may be some other questions, but in order for us to get this down the road, I think we have got to determine whether we're gonna go with the land or no land version of
Sure.
this thing. And also, we've got to determine whether we're gonna use some bullet points, general language, all bullet points or something, so that we can be beyond this for the public to be able to see where they think we're going. So I would say that first we should be talking about whether this question includes land or does not include land. Yeah, Tom?
Well, related to that, and based on what you just said about Denver and performing the fourth and being obligated to perform the fifth, that question, could it be, if it passes, is there an obligation to do all those things? And if there is, don't we have to address land acquisition?
So we have two questions up there, one without land, one with. The second one up there does, as the first bullet point, talk about the acquisition, redevelopment of the CDC property.
You understand my question?
Yeah.
If we do it without any reference to the land in there, we're promising, if it's construed as a promise to do it, we're promising to do something without necessarily acquiring the property, which would mean what?
No, so I think I understand your question. Correct me if I'm not answering it. If you use this question that does not include the land, you're
Right.
saying that you're going to use the proceeds of the bond issuance that comes from this authorization to do those 7 projects.
On
That-
property that the town doesn't yet own.
Correct. Well, I mean, I don't know where.
Let me just interrupt one
yeah.
second, okay? The plans that DHM have brought to us are on town-owned land, except for the polygon. It's on town-owned land. It's on CDC-owned
Yeah.
land?
Some of it is, yeah.
Some of it is, okay.
Yeah.
But not all, most of it is on public land.
I'm not so sure.
No, I mean,
Really?
really,
No,
here
no,
would be
Jackie,
the
that's-
property line is coming across like this.
A lot of it is on CDC.
Okay.
So this is on the CDC property.
Okay. Yes,
So Tom's
Katie.
question is, if this ballot issue passes and we don't get the land, do we then have to fulfill the bond, even though we don't own the land, right?
You
Isn't
don't
that
have
what
to
you're
do
asking?
those projects until you issue the bonds. So
Sorry?
You don't have to do those projects until you issue the bonds. So you just wouldn't issue the bonds. But once you
Got it.
do, you have to use those proceeds for those projects.
And what I'm saying is, doesn't that suggest a need to put something in the question so that there's a contingency for the acquisition to occur, so that you don't have a disconnect between the obligation and the ability to perform? I'm
Yeah.
raising that as just a question.
Sure, and so that's why we have that third option up there, which provides that the town will issue debt and raise taxes, both of those things on the condition that the town acquires that certain 2.317 acre parcel of real property located within the town and currently owned by the Roaring Fork Community Development Corporation.
So let me just step out there to get this going.
Yep.
I've talked to several council and Mike about this, and to you just a little bit in the hallway, but I think it's really important that we include land in this question, and one of the reasons that you said as a pro on GO bonds is for the reason of transparency. The purchase of this land has been a major, major conversation in this town forever. If we don't put the land purchase on here and put it in GO bonds, some people may see that as us being very non-transparent and not allowing the public to decide whether or not that land is purchased. And I personally even feel like that about COPs. I don't like COPs when other governments do it, and I don't think it's the right way to go, and it may very possibly be a reason for this to fail, in my opinion. But having said that, I know that some of the more financial astute people on this council have had discussions, other discussions, where they might have a different opinion, so I would like to hear those opinions. Bernie?
I don't really have a big opinion. I would, ask our bond counsel, what's the upside and downside of each approach in terms of getting it done and what we pay in terms of the cost of the bonds?
Sure.
Well, can I just say he partly, that's kind of what I'm reading, is the notes that he just said of the ups and downs of the two, but if you would like to go further.
Sure. So in this particular instance, where we're considering whether or not to use COPs or a lease purchase agreement to purchase the land after GO bonds are approved and or issued, I think one of the upsides are everything that the mayor just articulated. It's transparent, and frankly, in my Ellers role, I've been sitting in many council meetings where this is obviously one of the most important issues that you guys talk about, and it seems like the town and the board have been looking for a way to put this to a vote for some time. On the flip side, you're going to end up in a situation where if you put the land acquisition in your bond question and you pass it, the folks that are selling it to you know now that you have to purchase the land. And if I were you, I would think I was reducing my negotiating power, right? Because they know you have to buy it from them. And I don't know if that's necessarily the position that you want to be in. Another thing to consider is that if you roll the land into the question, you'll be able to pay those with general obligation bonds in one issuance. If you do it another way, you are going to incur basically more issuance costs because you're going to have to go through the debt procedure twice, right? You're going to have to do it once for the bonds and then once for the COPs or the bank loan or whatever. Those costs probably will not exceed $100,000, but those are costs that you're incurring that you wouldn't otherwise if you were using GO debt to do the entire project.
Okay. Mike, then? What's your name again?
Mark.
Mark. They both start with M. Mike, Mark?
Oh.
I mean, yes, Tom.
Could you solve the problem, you mentioned the problem about incurring the obligation to purchase and then losing negotiating position, and I understand that. Could you solve that by putting in the question to purchase it at a not to exceed price?
Yeah, I'd have to read your town charter to think about how that would work, but I think it would work just fine. Although, now that I think about that a little bit more off the top of my head, Colorado has a restriction on, or has a single subject rule. And so I think some people would argue that putting in the not to exceed price on the land is a subject separate from incurring debt. And now that I think about that a little bit more, that would be the case. So I think you would have to have two ballot questions.
That was gonna be my point. Is there any way to have a preliminary contract with CDC at a 2.5 million that's up on the board pending that the bond passes? We're working on a contract now, and I don't know how quickly we can put it together and get it in front of you. But, I mean, you're making a point. When we purchased the other the property we own now, we had that agreement in place before we went to the voters. So that would be kind of the normal process, but as everybody knows, we were in a hurry here to get this going and on the ballot for November, but we can try to bring that back in time for, if the deadline we're shooting at is September 6, 9, I think there's a possibility that we can do that, and that way you could put, tell me if I'm wrong, Paul, but couldn't you put it in there in accordance with a contract dated such and such that's already been approved? Is that possible?
I wouldn't,
Just 1 second, Jen's
Okay,
got it.
sorry. So, sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I would like to reflect that,
I didn't get an answer yet.
Okay,
yeah.
Finish
Tom
that
get an
one,
answer,
yeah.
then Jen.
So, let me
Mr.
just to be
Kittle.
clear as to your question, you want to include in a single question that the land is being acquired subject to a contract?
If we have a contract in place, what I'm suggesting is to do what we did
Well, we didn't. We used post money, we didn't need to ask the voters when we bought the land the first time. We just used post money straight up. We didn't
But I
use
thought that
no,
we-
the election was we own the property and we're asking for money to,
No, this was before we owned it, when we acquired it.
yeah, we didn't need to go to the election. We used post money
I
to buy
thought we
straight
did
up.
go there.
We went earlier and it failed. You know, years before, we went with a higher price and that failed. When we bought it in 2011, we just used straight up post money. We didn't ask the
Oh, I
voters.
thought we did. In any event, what I'm asking about is the authorization. The ballot question would specifically say, for these certain improvements and the purchase of the land in accordance with a contract dated such and such.
Yeah, so I just want to be clear as to when that contract's dated. Is it?
Well, it would be no later than the date that the council approves this resolution sending it to an election.
Okay. Yeah, so I mean, I think that would, yeah, I mean, you would just say that, you know, the council, I don't even know that you'd have to put it in there. I mean, you have a contract.
Yeah.
I don't think,
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
you
don't
would,
think you need to do anything. Yeah.
I just wanted to reflect that it has been the direction of this council for quite some time to have a contract to purchase the CDC property. And we are getting to the wire, and it would be really, really lovely and greatly appreciated and way less stressful to be in this conversation right now with the contract. And so the soonest we can get it, the most greatly appreciated it will all be.
Theoretically, actually, Mark was next.
done.
Susan.
Go
Okay.
ahead.
no, go ahead. I was just,
done.
Don't be done.
I'm done.
All right, Susan.
so the date of the 9th, if I understand, is they have to get the language to the clerk before we have our regular meeting. So we might have to have some special we won't be able to have our normal meeting schedule. We'll have to do some machinations to get it done, to have a first reading and a second reading, because we have to have 2 readings on an ordinance.
That's just how it is.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Bernie?
Can we design the contract so that it's contingent? I don't want to buy the land and then this bond issue fails.
Well, yeah, it's gotta be in there like that.
We've got to be conditional on this passing. Otherwise, we got to buy land with our own money, and we don't have any money to develop.
Having a contract is different than closing on the contract.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is you have a contract, and the contract would be contingent upon the
Yes.
approval of the purchase.
Okay, that's, clearly, we need that in there.
So the closing would have to be after November.
Yes, okay, fine.
Okay.
Next question, if I may.
Sure.
Okay, it says, "We're in order to further the goals of the town desires to redevelop certain blah, blah, and we're gonna enter into a sale." Should we not consider that some backup justification to the public why we have accepted or arrived at this purchase price? Why do we think this is a fair price to buy this land at?
You answer your own question.
think we should.
Right.
We'll have an appraisal.
Correct.
So we don't have one now, though.
By September 2nd, we'll have an appraisal, and it'll also meet the goals of the GOCO grant, because they have an appraisal process for park purchases,
When will we have the appraisal?
September 2nd.
Gary?
Well, and the whole piece of this is, to me, is that we have not been clear that we wanted to purchase the whole thing. And so we keep talking about splitting it and buying pieces of it. You know, this, in the end, you know, we're very clear now that it's simple. We have a landowner that wants to sell the entire property, not a piece of the property. So we are looking at, the only option is to buy the whole thing. And a piece of it could be redeveloped, and a piece will be used as a park. So it just, let's make that really simple, but that's also why, you know, getting appraisals and everything have been, you know, not as fast as things should be. And so, you know, I think, personally, I look at this and I think we should include land. Let's make, I've been asking it the whole time, make it as clear and as simple to the voters as possible so they can understand it. And I truly believe if you put all of it into one question and you do a really good job of explaining to the public why, there's no confusion on the COPs and stuff. We're having enough of a discussion here. I really believe that, you know, we should just include it all, be transparent on this entire thing, and let's get a contract if we can get a contract. But, you know, the reality is here, it's not like we're trying to deal with a private landowner that is just looking to make money off the town. This is the Roaring Fork Community Development Corporation. They are still a partner with the town, and they are going to be looking to work with us on this piece. So I personally just believe that we should include it all and move forward with that. But that's,
Okay, just so we can move on to the next things, so that we can move on to the next things, is there anybody sitting at this table who does not feel like we should include the land in the ballot language, and also that we should get a contract in our hands and a appraisal? Anybody who's not on that boat? Okay. All right. Okay, so really, our next deal is, tell me if I'm wrong here, is these bullet points and how we're gonna deal with this. Because I would like to start with, what is so clear cut that we don't wanna commit to it because it's too restrictive for us, and we may not wanna do it? Are there points? Yes?
I raise a related question. You also have to be careful that it's permissive enough. That's the other
Correct.
thing, is that, you know, if you make it too restrictive in order to be definitive with the voters, you gotta understand that you could be limited to that.
I think that's
So-
what I just was saying.
Well, no,
in
you
a
were,
different
I thought
way.
you were saying that we want to make sure we're specific enough so that the voters know, but on the other hand,
No.
okay.
I was actually saying, let's make sure we get rid of anything that is so restrictive that it says you will plant 5-inch grass on a 3x3. I don't want that in there. I mean, personally, I think that's crazy. But I would just, yes, Katie?
I have a question and I just need to back up.
Yes.
So if we're gonna go with this option B, and we're now moving our indebtedness up to $12,350,000,
Up to.
what does that mean for the extension of the bonds? They have to go beyond 2026.
Well, you're right. And I haven't looked at the numbers as closely as the folks at Ellers have. I do know that in order to basically continue the financing program that you have so that taxes are not increased, right, at least in terms of people seeing it on their property tax bill, the maturity of, or the final payment of this new debt is going to have to go out to a date that Mike can speak to.
So what we did was take the last run that Bruce did when he was here in early July. And if you go to the side that says land in,
Land and,
Okay,
And instead of the 4% rate that's built into this, knowing that the current interest rate is 1.5%, and if you said it grew to 2% by the time you issued it in December, with proceeds coming in January. And the only other assumption that was made in this one was instead of 25%, you would have up to 20% to use in maintenance, so it freed up a little bit more money. How much could you issue? And so if you look at the top 3 columns, it shows future capacity, and it looks like 12,442,000, and if you go to the far right, annual surplus, plus there's $1 million left. So it gets really, it covers that 12.35 that's in that total question, just using what I would say is the current interest rate, as well as a slight reduction in that maintenance over time. So instead of 25%, 20%.
So then we would then also have to change our ballot
language to not 4.1, but 2%.
No, so the 4.1% is in there to kind of put a ceiling on where you can go to.
I get that, but if we go to 4%, these numbers don't matter.
Correct. If
So-
it was 4%.
Right, then we're going beyond 2026. This is like a best-case scenario.
If the interest rates change to those numbers, correct.
So when Ellers put these numbers together, they probably built in 10 basis points into where the interest rate was going to be, assuming that you guys are going to issue these bonds in, let's say, January. So this is their projection of what the market's going to look like in 6 months. They're pretty good at that, and so this is where they think that you'll end up then. I mean, obviously something terrible in the world can happen, and this can go out the door, but
Let's not think about that.
right.
So you'd still keep in your worst-case interest rate of, it looks like there's been 4.1, some places it says 4, double what we're looking at from this land in spreadsheet. So I guess we just need to have the worst-case scenario numbers so that we know that if it ends up being, because we need to match our ballot language, if it's gonna be 4%, how many years are we adding beyond 2026?
I have to go back and look, just off the top of my head, I would say, given that you're starting at a low interest rate, and it's gonna be variable over time, because it's not all 4%, it'll be lower in the early years, higher in the out years typically. Maybe 2 years.
Okay, so maybe to 2028, so we're looking at a 12-year extension of existing taxes instead of 10.
Well, it actually,
Sorry,
21.
6,
Yeah.
right, so 6 to 8,
Right.
okay. Ken?
So with this language, to piggyback on Katie, that at the assumption of land in at 12 million, then we are agreeing that we want the deluxe park. Therefore, if we choose not to have the deluxe park and reduce some of these bullet points, or just lower the amount, but still have many of these, just by taking off little 5As or 2s or whatever from the Basalt River Park cost estimate summary, then we could stay within our time frame and make the numbers work.
If interest rate, yeah.
Yes.
Right, we'd have
Interest
to
rates.
trim.
Can I also just jump in really quickly? And I think it's important for you guys to remember that taking off bullet points doesn't necessarily mean that you have to lower the principal amount that you have up there. You can still have your perfect park. It just means that you're not promising to the electors that you're specifically going to have a gathering area, right?
So, and this may be the same question Jennifer just asked, but if, for instance, we bid this out and the construction of the park ends up costing us 40% less than what the numbers we have been looking at, what happens? Do we pay off the bond earlier? What happens to the numbers?
So if you guys go out for bid and you are able to build the park that you've always dreamed of, and it's 50% less than what you have authorization for, and frankly what you've issued, because it's possible that you don't find out that the costs are lower until you've actually issued your bonds. You have this chunk of money that you got to begin with, your principal amount, so you can just turn around and use that principal amount to pay off your bonds right away. What you can't, and you could also make the decision that, you know, we want to save some of this money for a year or two because we have another idea of how we want to improve the park, and that falls within the definition of the authorization that you have in the election question. But what you cannot do is say, oh, look, you know, we ended up coming in under our riverfront park property. Let's, you know, build Mike a new, you know, ginormous office in town hall, or, you know, let's start redoing the streets. You have to stay within the parameters of your election question.
Okay,
And
yeah.
what typically happens if there's a big spike in interest, what you do is you trim your bond size down to meet your repayment stream. So you just constrict the size of your bond issue. You don't issue the full amount.
Right.
And you only issue that amount which you can repay.
Okay. Are we good on this part? Can we move on? All right. So let's get to this checklist of things. I would like to hear some ideas and comments about how we might take some of this off that is too restrictive for us, or get some more general language on some of these things. Just, I mean, I know I'm, yeah, yes, or you.
Yes, sure do. When I look at this, I go, we unsimplified the ballot issue, and we're making it, if we had too many bullets, we're not making it as clear as what we want. You might think we are, but we're not, because the reality is we have not voted to do every single piece of this. It includes some of this stuff, but, you know, I'm looking at this as, yes, we have to do something with Two Rivers Road, and we have to do something with the bus stops and stuff, but don't make it so specific in the ballot that, you know, that we're looking at, you know, these specific things. I like, you know, the acquisition and redevelopment of the 2.317 acre parcel of real property. That should be very descriptive, because that's it's a major component of what we're doing here. But then we are looking at designing and the construction of a park. And because truly we have posts design, which is good right now, but, you know, when it comes down to it, there are potential cost savings that we could do. And there's potential things that we might want to change. Don't get too specific in this. So the way I look at it is, let's find a way to shrink that bullet points, because the reality is we're selling this before people get into the ballot. And we're going to show people, you know, this is the concepts for the park. So,
Mike?
In that first bullet point, and it's something that Paul and I talked about, and kind of left it generic, do you want to define the development parcel? Because this says acquisition and redevelopment of the 2.317 acres. And somebody could read that and said,
Redevelop the whole thing.
right.
That's exactly what would happen.
okay. Well, why would we put redevelopment? We'd just go the acquisition? Because
That's true.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you,
That's true.
and then that was sort of, do you want to identify the development parcel or not, or just talk about the acquisition of the property?
I think acquisition is a safer thing right now. Yeah, Bernie?
You don't think it would be safer to identify that approximately half will be used for a public park, and approximately half could be used for development? I think a lot of people are interested to
That's
make sure
different
that
than what
it's
you
not
said.
gonna be all park, that there is a possibility of that development.
Carrie?
I agree with Bernie on this one. You know, I don't want to say specifics of like it's 0.43% is going to be used for this and that, but I'd like that to be pretty obvious that it's not all going to be redeveloped. And that was why I want to make this more broad, because of that exact issue.
So if the wording said approximately 50% park and 50% potential redevelopment, or to potential
For
development?
acquisition of the 2.3 acres with development on half or something.
Approximately.
Approximately.
Approximately half.
Whoever said a portion.
A
is good.
portion's good.
That's really good. Okay, is
Do you
somebody
wanna,
getting this?
so do you wanna say development or redevelopment?
Development.
It's development.
Please define for us
better
the
if
difference
term
between
is-
the two.
It's a pretty flexible term.
Right.
So you gotta be careful about that.
So I think people would say develop, and they would expect you to take a blank piece of property and build something up there, right? Redevelopment in people's mind is that you're tearing something down, like the Pan and Fork, and doing something else with the property.
So it is the redevelopment of the parcel.
You think? It's raw land now. There's no
Okay, hold on.
trailers, there's,
Hold on, Bernie, Susan has her hand up.
sorry.
Well, actually, the park is development under our code. So I think we want to say allow commercial development on a,
Or allowed
commercial or
development, I'd
nonprofit
say a
development. I think
development.
we could work on it and come back.
on a
but I think
portion.
we-
Yeah,
Yeah,
they're-
just, I like that on a portion. That's good because, okay. Personally, can I just jump in here? I like design and construction of a new Basalt River Park. I would just as soon not say, improvements to the road, construction of bus stops, installation of additional park features at Old Pond Park, construction of an ADA comfort station. I'd be okay with trail improvements. I would just as soon not have upgrading the grass. I would like to get it down to the acquisition, design, and construction of a new park. Pretty much, period, yes.
And you need some sort of general and other something.
Yeah.
Okay, and other
You know
something.
what I'm saying? You need, if you want the flexibility, don't you have to have a flexible
Yeah, so,
category in there?
and so you, instead of having bullet points, you could just have a paragraph that says, for the acquisition, development, and construction of other improvements to Basalt River Park.
Okay, Mark, Jen, Tom.
I think as a voter, I would kinda wanna know where the $12 million is gonna go. And with a little bit of, the bus stops and the stuff like that, I don't know that needs to be in there, but gosh, I don't know.
I agree with, I think we agree with
Just a
you.
second, yes.
I'm gonna start my line with the same way Mark did, is as a voter, I would be concerned at this point with not having a public input session yet on the DHM design and us steamrolling straight into a number and what it includes or what it doesn't include. And that's what really struck me today rereading the packet is citizens, I really want to hear what it is that you envision on there. And being at the farmer's market on Sundays, or the market on Sundays, and hearing what is of interest. There is a variation. There is a solid interest in acquiring the land, but the finishes on it are different. And we need to find a way to nuance the language here that includes, that is somewhat clear, but also somewhat vague, so that we can have the time between September 9th and November 9th, those 2 months, to really get the public input.
Well, we have more time than November 9th, because the reality is what we're trying to do here is purchase property and set up, we've got to take acknowledgement that the Post has, it's not, we didn't develop that plan, we've guided that plan, but our Post, who are members of our community, have created this great plan, concept plan. It's a concept still. And so we'll have, take that concept, show, potentially what we could do here. And I agree with you, and I agree with Mark, we need to add some language, but not so specific, because the voters could look at that and be like, cool, I want something like that, and we guarantee that once, if we get this funding, that we're gonna drill down exactly what we're gonna do, and we're gonna take public input on it, so who knows what comes out of the final piece, but we're not spending any more than this, and that's just fine. But we are redeveloping the park, we are allowing a redevelopment parcel for potential, things that we don't necessarily foresee today, but, you know, to me, I wanna make it clear, and that's why I also wanted to look back on how we did the Levinson, parcel purchase, is because this is very similar to that, because we purchased property, we had ideas for parks, we had ideas for stormwater, we had ideas for redevelopment, and guess what? We did it. It took a long time, but it happened, and it's a great example of what we can do here. And so I would love to see how we worded that to make sure that, you know, that we keeps flexibility, but I want to be clear to the voter. However, I think truly, it's not the ballot that's going to get people. It's making sure that we do a good education piece for people.
Point that Gary just made.
And I would just reinforce that, I guess to Jen's point, I think if we have a pretty clear thing on, we want acquisition with a portion developed, design and construction of a new, we can continue to take public input until we are 100 years old. If we put bullet points in there, we are married to them, we have to build bus stops, even if we want something else. So I am still feeling like, let's be careful about what we say, because nothing will stop us from taking more public input and morphing the design however we need to, unless we put it in the ballot language, and that's gonna happen quickly.
So with that, I really like Gary's point that, that it's not set, we get the money and then we do have more design and say. And so I'm proposing that it's acquisition, redevelopment on a portion. So, keep the first bullet point, keep the second bullet point, cut the third bullet point, pare down the fourth bullet point to include design and construction of a new Basalt River Park, and then remove the installation of an additional park feature at Old Pond Park, remove construction of an ADA comfort station, keep trail improvements, and I'm undecided on the upgrading the grass on the RFCDC parcel.
I would remove that last piece,
Remove
sorry.
that.
I would too.
I'd remove
Yeah.
that last piece because it just, we don't know, it's like,
Right.
once we get moving with
Yes.
this, somebody might come to us with a really cool idea of how they wanna redevelop, and we don't have to do the grass.
Right.
And I don't want anyone saying, we gotta do grass, and we gotta do grass around the new development, so just take that out too.
Okay, so Jen, if I got this right, is on acquisition and development on a portion. You wanted the Two Rivers Road stuff?
Correct.
Yes?
Yes.
Not the bus stops necessarily. Design and construction, yes. The mere fact that it's saying design and construction means we're gonna be designing, so that's good.
Getting rid of the including.
Right, getting rid of the including.
Yeah, getting rid of everything after park, getting rid of, feature to Old Pond Park, construction of ADA, leaving trail improvements, and upgrading the grass.
Remove.
Remove. So we're down to 1, 2, 3, 4 points, and so we have something to start with, and let me just get some input from these guys about how you feel about those bullet points. Katie?
Fine, I'm also trying to visualize what this actually looks like in a ballot, and just imagine it being really long and thin and going on for pages and pages. So I like simplicity and succinct language that's also very clear. I think that's our challenge, to sort that out. I have a question related to, we get this ballot passed and we're talking about design and construction. What does that look like? are we gonna go through another massive town planning project to now determine how we're going to spend these 6 point whatever million dollars? Or are we gonna be really clear that it's related to what Post has come up with and what these cost estimates are broken down to? Because otherwise, we're gonna get a ballot approved potentially, and we're gonna spend 2.5 years fighting over what we're gonna spend the money on.
And I think you're making a really good point, and I think it's wise when we get past the ballot language, when we start talking about what we're gonna commit to, that we say that we're starting with the post design, because that was the public process part of this, and it may not look exactly like that, but I think in my heart, that's, where we start, and that's, I always assume that, Jen.
So then that drills down a little bit further to the amount. Since this design and this ballot language is based upon the post proposal, I want to publicly state that I am not fully in favor of the 6.6 million, having the Basalt River full design, and I would feel more comfortable reducing the ballot amount proposed from, I guess 9.4 is the highest, 9.4 million.
Uh-huh.
And paring it down, and instead of, to respect many of constituents out there and their concern of this is far grander than we have interest in.
Gary?
My only issue with that is we're playing around with things that, then what does that mean? What does that take away? And so, I know I've seen some value engineering by citizens. I cost out parks a lot, and I cost out a lot of landscaping, and you just don't know until you put the full package out there of what you're really gonna get, including the fact that you've got a bond for town council project, for town of Basalt projects. There's just things that we don't know, and so if you're looking at trying to play with it, what are you looking at playing with? I mean, what piece of this is the big problem? I mean, I see the biggest cost is the River Park full design.
Right.
And, I don't know, I can't, I look at it as that the citizen committee has worked really hard on this whole thing, and I think we have, as a council, taken out some significant portions of that design for now. Like that activities hub is not in this amount. So we've already done a pretty good job of saying, I love the vision, but we're already paring down the vision. And I see, there's potentially more we can do, but without cutting Post's legs off, I don't want to start playing around with knocking numbers down unless we have specifics of what we're knocking down.
Can I just say too that, I guess I've gotten to a level of comfort, unless Mark's not with me, that these numbers are all up to, we can pay down the bonds, like if we spend 6 million instead of 9 million, great. But if we are shorting ourselves, if you're gonna build your own house, which you have done, you don't wanna say, I think I can build it for $10 and then it costs 15 and then you don't have the 5. So, Bernie.
I thought we had this discussion at the last council meeting and voted to accept the full build-out. And I
Without-
haven't changed my position that I want this to be, in a sense, a referendum, finally. And I think what we have all put out there and has been out there has been, in general, the post plan, okay? And I do like the idea of paring the language down, because you might want a light sculpture for
Right.
$200,000 because it's the coolest thing on earth, and you could do with a few little less shrubs somewhere, something like that. I don't know. we need some flexibility, but I want the full build-out because I want this to be a referendum on the kind of park people would like. And I think this gives us the real information and gives the public, based on this 2-year process, that the DAC, simplified and unified and gave us further direction, and now the Post has given us an even better refinement. Not that that's a strict blueprint that we have to do. So I support the whole thing.
Right. So, just so I'm not making any assumptions, it seems like we're on the same page, or pretty close to on the same page, with simplifying the ballot language so we have some flexibility and have some leeway to continue design, which is clearly what it says here. But we're, as a group, pretty committed to a really nice park that, as presented by Post, and we might be able to get it cheaper, and that would be great. Is that where we're at? Can we be done with this one? Or is there anything more, Gary, Mike, Paul?
Oh, I bet it's really interesting, too.
Fortunately, you guys have already knocked one of them off the list, so that helps. And you guys got that list, right? I think I have it, but I just want to make sure. Okay. So I just want to make everyone kind of aware that staff now is going to have some deadlines that they're going to have to meet. You guys have talked about September 9th, but that is absolutely the drop dead date. Susan, I'm sorry, Pam actually has already coordinated with the county clerks, so you've already hit one of your deadlines. But September 9th, that's it. I mean, you can't talk about it anymore, so just keep that in mind. After.
On that point, just to be discreet here, now, when you say September 9th, if we vote, what date does it have to be voted on so that you can deliver on the 9th?
That's an excellent point. So the ballot title has to be in the county clerk's office on September 9th. So you have to have the ballot title fixed, not like 10 o'clock on the 9th. It has to be sometime before that.
8th.
Right.
Maybe I missed this, but what did we get for a commitment on public comment dates in this next few days?
Can I clarify
Yeah,
that?
sure.
I want to clarify that this is just the direction. There's going to be a whole public process on this, and then there's public hearings for when we do the ordinance, putting this on the ballot.
So this is going to be a resolution, so it only takes
Okay.
one meeting.
Okay.
Do you understand, Gary, that's done by the 8th of September?
No, I understand that. I just want to make sure that everybody understands that we're not making the final decision right here. Final decision is going to be on set date, but we're going to do public information before that.
I do not have my election calendar in front of me, but sometime in late September, the town is going to be responsible for distributing Tabor notices. Those Tabor notices will not only include the ballot language, but pro and con statements that the designated election official, which I have to believe is Pam drawing the short stick there, is going to summarize those comments. So you guys can provide comments, anyone from the town can, but that is going to be something that the town has to do. And it's going to be something that, whether you're for this idea or against it, you're going to want to be a part of the Tabor notice, because it is, for better or worse, an election tool that people use in terms of persuading people. And that election notice will be in front of voters when they open up their ballot.
So you're saying we, as citizens and voters, can input our opinion, pro or con?
Anybody who is a registered voter within the town of Basalt can submit a comment on the ballot issue.
We've done this, been through this in past elections. I will distribute a memorandum to the council that clearly identifies what you can and can't do as a council person and then as a private citizen. So we'll get all that done.
Well, instead, and that's one big piece, is that we've got to remember that once it's referred to the ballot, staff of the town of Basalt cannot
Yeah, that's one-
participate
that's one of the
on
things
staff
that I'll
time.
address.
So they can answer questions,
Right.
but that'll be a critically important piece.
Okay, so we actually need a motion.
Right?
No.
On this one? Okay.
No motion. But do you want to identify the first date that you're going to come back and talk to the public or allow them to talk about it? But I'm just
What is
asking.
this? Wasn't this a motion? I thought you said this was a resolution.
Well, it is, but you're not ready to approve it.
It says,
Yeah, we're not accepting it as is, we're gonna,
gotta wait till they.
Oh, right, okay, okay.
I'm just wondering if we were talking about a schedule for public comment before you make a final decision. I don't know if you want to identify a next date.
Can we identify a couple of dates for, like, whether, however you intended when you mentioned,
So, commenting on the resolution that were, with these four bullet points, and then whatever language, we've penciled out, Thursday, August 18th, Saturday, August 20th, Thursday, August 25th. So Thursday, Saturday, Thursday. And having this resolution that includes the acquisition of property back to the council on the 23rd. And then a final action, which would be September 6th, so that you could get ahead of the 9th. So
and where is the regular public hearings on this versus just?
well, it's a resolution, so you don't have to set public hearings. These are things that we would just create.
Okay, well, we need
we're
to
creating-
do
we're-
that.
we just create
Okay.
them. You can
Right.
say on the 23rd,
Right.
23rd and the 6th.
And are they special meetings?
No, not the 23rd, just
23rd is a
6th.
regular meeting, the 6th is.
I thought you said 18th. Was
No.
there
Those are,
something?
those are for public information.
Got it, okay. Jen,
In which,
then Katie.
I lost it, pass.
Okay.
During the time in which we're having these public information sessions, I ask that there's some way in which we can receive written comment that is then passed along to council immediately, so that we can contemplate that in our conversations moving forward on this resolution.
And can we also put this language on the website, this draft language on the website, so we can get more input on that language? Yeah, Jen. Or Mike, whoever.
Might I suggest before we put it on the website, have like the finance committee look at it?
Okay.
Or, you know, a subset, somebody that's looking at, saying, yeah, this is what was agreed.
What we said.
Right.
In these
Jen?
public input times, will there be a facilitator who is going to manage this,
So-
and where will they be?
So the way we did it on Fix the Fork, so going back to that issue, is we actually put up the boards and those cost estimates that relate to the bond issue, and just as people came in, answered their questions. So 3 or 4 display pieces, and then a handout. Front side being sort of the ballot issue, the question, with what I would call frequently asked questions, like what does this mean? And it's really important, as Paul describes, while it says increase in taxes, what does that mean? So you can kind of describe what it was, because that was really helpful in the Fix the Fork, where people would come in, well, I thought we were using sales tax to pay for this. Why does it say this? And I would say half of the questions Judy and I got were like that.
So there will be staff there?
Right.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Question.
Yes, you got it.
Can you please rate now so I can write it down and everybody can hear it?
Right.
Hit me with all the dates, the times, and what that opportunity is.
So let's just start for council action. August 23rd, back with the resolution, in which we'll invite public comment. So that's the one that we worked on tonight with public comment, with final action September 6th. Then 3 dates in which people can come and ask questions about it, which would be Thursday, August 18th, Saturday, August 20th, Thursday, August 25th. The Thursday, when we did Fix the Fork, we did like a 6 to 9. So there was a period of time where people could come in, 6 to 9, and ask questions. Then we had, on Saturdays, we did a 8 to noon. So that Saturday would be an 8 to noon. So people would have at least 4 hours to come in.
My only question is should we time it with the Sunday market?
I thought of that too.
We can do something at Sunday Market.
Okay, maybe,
I
yeah.
like that too. I mean, I wrote a note
Yeah.
tonight that.
Because I think, you know, honestly, it's one of those things where so many people come through the Sunday market that it would be great to have our little tent and have the floor. I know, she's been awesome.
Did you have something, so you're suggesting in addition to or in lieu of Saturday?
I was
20th?
thinking, well, I was thinking actually instead of that Saturday, because the Sunday will get more traffic. I believe that it'll get more traffic, and it's not all on Jen, and the staff will be doing this piece. I just look at it going, where are you gonna generate the most traffic, on a random Saturday or the Sunday?
And I wanna put it out there that it is a different demographic that comes to the market, that frequents the market. So that is something that I wanna caveat, is the demographic that I have been interacting with are people that specifically come to the market and are not specifically coming to ask me council questions or where it's going. And then as well, on the market date, if we can please request from Jimmy Dula to have a prime tent location. The number of visitors that come by vary greatly dependent upon location. And for it to be somewhat in the main walkway, yeah.
Well, I think you would advertise it the same if you were gonna do it Saturday or Sunday, so at least the people that would show up on a Saturday know that, hey, I can do my Sunday market too.
And then the second part to go with that, if you can please have a sign that I have requested in the past that states Town of Basalt and what we're actually doing there, because I'm given a blank tent every single week, and I've requested that previously. It'd be great to see that happen for this very special date.
Okay. Can we call it a day on this one and take a quick break? Oh, good. I gotta stand.
Good job, everyone.
Oh. as Katie pointed out, it's already been 12 hours for most everybody here.
magically change. I don't want to shortchange it. I love that you're doing this, but
Okay. Guys, can we do this later?
I'll tell you where to take it because you're missing.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, everyone. Okay, we are back in. Our next item is Resolution 34 of the Town Council calling an election on November 8th for a ballot question regarding whether the town may reestablish its right to provide telecommunications services, advanced services, and cable TV services either directly or indirectly with public or private sector partners. And who is this person?
This is Tom Smith.
Okay.
I can start it out and Mike can fill in behind me on the merits. The first thing to understand about this is that it does not create an obligation for the town to do anything. The reason it's called for is that many municipalities and counties in the state are attempting to restore their authority to work with public and private entities to expand telecommunication services in areas where service is not good. And the law was originally written to preclude local governments from having that option for purposes I can only guess at. And then the law was amended to say, okay, local governments can do it if the electors approve it. This ballot question is only to establish the authority for the town to provide those services either itself or in conjunction with other entities. And therefore, it's simply an expansion of town authority. It doesn't create an obligation to do anything in that field. We've been asked by other municipalities in the valley to cooperate with them because I assume of the potential for intergovernmental cooperation in providing those services at some point in the future.
Gary, bet you have something to say.
Well, I've been watching this from the Picken County side, and I was approached by the school district of how to create better internet access for lower income neighborhoods. And this is just one of the ways to potentially do it. And so I'm definitely going to support this. It doesn't obligate us to do anything, and I think it shows solidarity among local governments to really provide broadband to the community as a whole. And when the school district was talking to me about the fact that there's kids, they're all getting these Chromebooks, and they're all going to go home at night to do work, and a lot of them, in the low-income neighborhoods, they don't have internet service at home, and they don't have cell service to do that. And so being able to provide this potentially is a huge community benefit.
Just a quick question for, I guess, Gary or Tom. This is enabling legislation, is all it is, just like at
Correct.
the state level. Is there any downside to it at all?
No cost, except the cost of putting it on the ballot.
Has anybody got a problem, or is there a motion?
I'll motion to approve resolution 34 series of 2016.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks. Okey-doke. First, are we on 8? Yes. First reading of ordinance 20, an ordinance of the Town Council of Basalt utilizing the Uniform Election Code of 1992 in lieu of the Municipal Code of 1965 in order to participate in a coordinated election with Eagle and Picken counties on November 8. Pam Schilling.
What she said.
That's what I was thinking.
Pretty much. It's a housekeeping measure, basically. Our charter says that we use the Municipal Election Code of 1965, and the Municipal Election Code of 1965 says if you want to use the Uniform Election Code of 1992, you need to do an ordinance allowing you to do so.
Other questions or comments? Gary, did you have your?
I
Katie?
was just gonna make a motion.
Quick question. Part 3 of the recitals, the town of Basalt intends to participate in a statewide election to be held on November 4th, 2014. Could totally,
Nice catch.
okay.
Good, ooh, she's got an eagle eye.
For
Okay.
numbers. Yes, I will correct that
Okay.
before second reading.
Right, so I make a motion to approve, ordinance number, which one is this? I had it. Number 20, series 2016, and set a public hearing, second reading for August 23rd, 2016.
Second.
Further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thanks, guys. Okay, so we actually don't have 8B, 8C. First reading of ordinance number 22, an ordinance of the town amending Chapter 4, Article 4 of the Basalt Municipal Code entitled Sales Tax to permit not more than 25% of the fund generated by the 1% sales tax rate dedicated to capital improvement projects for parks, open space, acquisition, and trail projects to be used for the maintenance of parks, open space, and trails, and submitting this ordinance to a referendum election. Mr. Scanlon.
So in 2013, we had an election, a question similar to this, where we dedicated a portion of post 10% to maintenance, and it came at the same time that we did the fix the fork issue. This is done by ordinance because it's actually in our code, so it doesn't, you don't approve this by resolution like you did on the broadband or the bond issue. This is actually an amendment to our code to allow this, so it takes 2 readings, one of which has to have a public hearing, and then if you approve it, it then goes on the ballot. As I think Mark Kwasinski asked in a series of emails, you know, this 25% looks a little high, and so we produced sort of a maintenance sheet that showed, in fact, he's correct. If you take what we currently have in terms of park acreage and then would apply the additional acreage that we anticipate picking up, that it would cost X. And so while we put in 25%, 20% could work as well, up to.
Based on our conversation earlier with the potential of adding the acquisition and getting our number up to 12.35, you said we may have to reduce this number to 25%.
Right. To 20.
Sorry, that's what I meant to say, 20% from 25. So is that what we need to amend this if we're gonna move forward with that?
Right. If you want to do the land purchase with a higher total, then this should really come down to 20%.
Okay.
Should we do that now, since that's kind of the direction?
Right.
Okay. And Gary?
You know, this is one of the things that, you know, all open space departments grapple with, is the fact that as you buy more property and you build more parks and you do all this stuff, maintenance goes up. So I just wanted to be absolutely certain that we don't have to keep going back to the voters, because we went back once. And so I'd rather come up with a number that really would work for the long-term haul of what we think we're gonna be able to acquire and maintain over the next at least 10 years? So that would be, do you feel 20% would work?
Yeah, because I don't see inside our boundaries of park purchase where we would be purchasing land and making park improvements.
Okay.
And does this 20% include our staff time? And for example, the water feature in Willits, at first that was stated that has been outsourced, and it is no longer a staff employee that maintains it. And so is this 20% at what our current public works staffing numbers are at? Or does this allow for an increase in public works employee numbers?
It could allow for an increase in public works employees numbers, because what we did was we took the per acreage cost. So if you added 7 acres, that's another $140,000. So if you wanted to go from contract labor to more town employees and still be able to handle all of it, it creates that flexibility to do that.
Okay.
Because
Yeah.
so, I mean, the way to look at this, and this is the way we've been doing it for the last 25 years with Picken County Open Space, is you give a top set all number overall for maintenance. And every year, council is gonna decide, basically, you know, this year we only need 13%, next year we'll need 15%. And so, you know, then you look at how that you're gonna do all the projects, either by consultant, contractor, or town staff. The biggest thing is we're as town council are gonna have to make decisions. When you add town staff, that's not a single year addition, because you're adding staff for multiple years, so.
Correct.
But I think that's easily during the budget time, and this is really to talk about, you know, potentially up to 20% of the post-tax that we take in every year can be used to maintain all this stuff. I think that, to me, it's prudent, and I just want to come up with a number that really works, but also not too high, because going from 10 to 25% is a pretty large jump.
So, anybody else, or are we ready for a motion with a 20% change in there? Anybody who's still awake and wants to make a motion?
Mayor, I move that the town council approve ordinance number 22, series of 2016, with the edit that the entitled sales tax to permit not more than 20% of the fund generated by the 1% sales tax. And set a public hearing and second reading for August 23rd, 2016.
Second.
Okay. Further discussion? I'm gonna say Bernie got the
Bernie
second.
got it.
Yeah, I'm giving it to Bernie.
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Okay, the next item is, well, recommendations from the Finance Committee. Did we already table this? Yes, okay, okay. Let's see. Oh, executive session. Is there a motion to go into executive session?
I move we go into executive session pursuant to all
As noticed on, contained in the agenda?
Sure.
Okay.
Did I hear a second? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are in executive session.
Table two things.